Dr. Mohler,
Yeah.
what you just said is very important for me and Matt and those here. There is a brother that trails me down the hallway today, a white brother who is in a new SBC church who has to figure out how to go home and talk about how this affects what he's trying to do at home. What do you say to that? That what you just said is important for the others of us who got to live through this tomorrow.
Right.
But for those who have to go home and this becomes another thing for what they're trying to do there.
I'm just curious, before you answer HB's question, raise your hand if you think this is something you are going to have to explain to people who are not entirely happy about it at your church back home. Just raise your hand. So I think that's maybe half. Raise your hand if you're pretty sure that will not be the case for you, that nobody's going to be upset at your church that the vice president spoke at the SBC. I'd say it's about half and half. Well, that's a different category. That's a different category. So back to HB's question to Al.
Well, I mean, this is a part of the scandal we often have to walk away with, is that there's no way to adequately explain anything to some people, nor do we even know what we would say, other than I am not buying into the Southern Baptist Convention because of 2 days in Dallas in 2018. I'm buying into the Southern Baptist Convention because here's the confession of faith, here's the body of churches, here's what we do on the mission field. I want to be a part of that. And the other thing I just want to say, I end up talking too candidly at this meeting. I'm tired. And
that's why we have this at 9 o'clock at night. We're trying to let the editing function go down.
But you folks are all smart enough to notice there's this massive generational transition taking place. And there is no question who's going to own the future. It's not going to be 80-year-olds. It's going to be 28-year-olds. Okay, so that's the future. So when you look at a room like that, just recognize we've got a period of time we're going to be working through. And so I just want to ask you to do something that I don't have any right to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Assume that a lot of the people who you know voted the wrong way when you saw that vote take place, and you saw that taking place, assume that they're your grandmother and your grandfather. And think of them the same way you would your grandmother and grandfather. You are not going to follow all their advice about how to vote or how to, do whatever, and you can't enter into some of the same conversations, but you do know they do not mean harm. And you do know that you can put up with a whole lot, at least in your life, because you understand they love you, and they're just some things only time will resolve. And so I'm just going to ask you, without any right to ask you, in a meeting like this, just recognize there are people who in a situation like this will do what they believe is right and you believe is wrong, and you'll do the same thing. And a part of this is, if it's not an issue of heresy and orthodoxy, then understand we're going to have to work through this over time. But you should be looking always at the trend line of an institution. Not a snapshot in history, we got to live with that, but it's a trend line. And the trend line is that increasingly the people in the room are going to be the people who are going to have the instincts you have and the convictions you have and the perspective and more cultural analysis that you have, but we're not there yet. And getting there as gracefully as possible is going to take everything all of us have.